The spirits have entrusted me with their story, and I will carry it forward, no matter the challenges that lie ahead. As I reflect on my time as a forest ranger in Smoky Mountain National Park, I realized that the experiences I encountered not only transformed me, but also revealed the intricate tapestry of life that exists within the forest. But beneath this picturesque facade lay something darker. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I noticed an unusual stillness in the forest. The usual cacophony of sounds faded into an eerie silence. I brushed it off as just a quiet night, but something felt off. I decided to head back to my cabin early. On my way, I stumbled upon an old stone circle hidden deep within the woods. I had never seen it before, and curiosity compelled me to explore. As I stepped into the circle, I felt a chill run down my spine. The air grew colder, and an inexplicable energy enveloped me. I brushed aside my unease, attributing it to fatigue. That night, I experienced vivid visions of the forest intertwined with shadows and whispers. I woke in a cold sweat, heart racing. The dreams continued for nights, each one more intense than the last. I saw figures in the woods, their faces obscured, their eyes filled with sorrow. They seemed to beckon me, urging me to listen, determined to uncover the truth. I began researching the area's history. What I found was chilling. The stone circle was believed to be a sacred site, a place where spirits of the forest communicated with the living. I still felt their presence, especially at night. Sometimes when the wind rustled through the trees, it sounded like whispers calling my name. I knew I was not alone in this fight. The spirits were with me, guiding me as I navigated the complexities of conservation and community advocacy. Now, after all these years, I can confidently say that my experience in Smoky Mountain National Park has forever altered my perspective on life and nature. I am not just a ranger. I am a steward of the land, a voice for the spirits that dwell within it. I strained to listen, trying to discern their message. Then it happened. The ground beneath me trembled, and the air crackled with energy. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman, ethereal and sorrowful. Her eyes bore the weight of centuries, and she reached out to me. I felt an overwhelming sense of grief and urgency wash over me. The spirits were trying to convey a warning about the destruction of the forest and the encroaching development threatening their sacred land. In that moment, my life changed forever. I realized I had a responsibility, not just to protect the forest, but to honor the spirits that dwelled within it. I rushed back to the ranger station, fueled by a newfound purpose. I began organizing meetings with local leaders and advocating for stronger conservation measures, but the more I spoke out, the more resistance I faced. Some accused me of being superstitious, while others dismissed my experiences as mere hallucinations. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the spirits were counting on me. I continued to share my story, urging others to recognize the importance of preserving the forest. As my efforts gained traction, I noticed a shift in the community's attitude. More people began to join our cause, drawn by the urgency of the message I had shared. Together, we organized cleanup efforts and educational programs, fostering a deeper connection between the community and the forest. Yet, the shadows lingered. I still felt their presence, especially at night. Sometimes when the wind rustled through the trees, it sounded like whispers calling my name. I knew I was not alone in this fight. The spirits were with me, guiding me as I navigated the complexities of conservation and community advocacy. Now, after all these years, I can confidently say that my experience in Smoky Mountain National Park has forever altered my perspective on life and nature. I am not just a ranger. I am a steward of the land, a voice for the spirits that dwell within it. The forest is alive, filled with history, emotion, and a profound connection to those who came before us. And as I stand in the heart of the Smokies, I know that my journey is far from over. The whispers of the forest continue to guide me, reminding me of the importance of protecting this sacred land for generations to come. The spirits have entrusted me with their story, and I will carry it forward, no matter the challenges that lie ahead. As I reflect on my time as a forest ranger in Smoky Mountain National Park, I realize that the experiences I encountered not only transformed me, but also revealed the intricate tapestry of life that exists within the forest. It's a realm where the lines between the physical and the spiritual blur, and where the stories of the land and its inhabitants intertwine. The Smoky Mountains are more than just a collection of trees and wildlife. They are a living entity, pulsating with energy and history. The ancient trees stand as sentinels, their gnarled roots gripping the earth like guardians of a sacred past. Many in the community were struggling to adapt to a world increasingly focused on sustainability, and I understood their hesitation. As I navigated this conflict, I recognized the importance of empathy. The more I listened to their concerns, the more I understood their resistance. I realized that my role wasn't just to advocate for conservation. It was to foster dialogue and build trust. Each creature, from the tiniest insect to the majestic elk, contributes to the delicate balance of the ecosystem, reminding us that every life has purpose. The park rangers I worked alongside were a diverse group, each bringing their unique perspectives and experiences to the table. There was Mark, a seasoned ranger with a pragmatic approach to conservation. He had spent over 20 years in the park, and his knowledge of the land was unparalleled. Mark was often the voice of reason during heated discussions, grounding our more idealistic ideas with practical solutions. Then there was Sarah, a passionate young ranger who had recently joined our team. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and she often pushed us to think beyond traditional boundaries. Sarah believed wholeheartedly in the connection between nature and spirituality, often advocating for the importance of the spirits in our conservation efforts. Her ability to communicate with the community and inspire others was invaluable, especially as we began to rally support for our cause. The local community surrounding the park was as complex as the forest itself. Many residents had lived there for generations, cultivating a deep-rooted connection to the land. Some were skeptical of our efforts, fearing that conservation would come at the expense of their livelihoods. They relied on logging, tourism, and development, viewing the forest as a resource to be exploited rather than a sanctuary to be preserved. However, there were also those who shared our vision. An elderly woman named Margaret became a key ally. She often spoke of the old ways, recounting tales passed down through her family about the spirits of the forest. Margaret's wisdom and connection to the land helped bridge the gap between our coalition and the more skeptical community members. Her stories resonated with many, igniting a newfound respect for the forest's spiritual significance. As I delved deeper into the history of the land, I began to understand the spirits that inhabited it. They were not mere figments of imagination. They were the essence of the forest, embodying its struggles and triumphs. Each spirit had its own story, woven into the very fabric of the trees, streams, and mountains. During my encounters in the stone circle, I learned about one particular spirit, an ancient woman named Alawan. She was the guardian of the forest, a symbol of strength and resilience. Alawan's presence was both comforting and commanding, and I could sense her deep sorrow for the damage inflicted upon her home. She urged me to listen, to share her story with the living, and to advocate for the protection of the land. With each visit to the stone circle, I felt myself growing more attuned to these spirits. They were not just voices of the past. They were active participants in our present. Their whispers guided my actions, reminding me that I was part of a larger narrative, one that transcended my individual experience. The tension between preservation and exploitation created a palpable conflict within the community. As I presented our vision for the sanctuary, I faced fierce opposition from those who felt threatened. The representative from the opposition, A local businessman named Tom was particularly vocal. He saw our initiative as a direct threat to his livelihood and rallied others to join his cause. Tom's arguments were compelling. He painted a vivid picture of economic decline, invoking the fear of job loss and diminished opportunities. Yet, beneath his rhetoric, I sensed a deeper fear, one rooted in the uncertainty of change. Many in the community were struggling to adapt to a world increasingly focused on sustainability, and I understood their hesitation. As I navigated this conflict, I recognized the importance of empathy. The more I listened to their concerns, the more I understood their resistance. I realized that my role wasn't just to advocate for conservation. It was to foster dialogue and build trust. I needed to show them that protecting the forest didn't mean sacrificing their way of life. In the weeks leading up to the summit, I worked tirelessly to create a narrative that encompassed both the spiritual and practical aspects of conservation. I sought to unite the community by highlighting the shared history we all held with the land. You talk about preservation, but what about our families? One man shouted, "What about the future of our children?" As the discussion unfolded, I felt the tension in the room begin to shift. People started sharing their personal stories, how their families had relied on the land for generations, how they felt a connection to the forest, but also a fear of losing their livelihood. It's a living, breathing entity, filled with stories waiting to be told. My experiences have taught me that every voice matters, both human and spiritual, and that together, we can create a future that honors the past, while nurturing the present. As the movement to establish a sanctuary within Smoky Mountain National Park gathered momentum, the conflict between conservationists and those reliant on the land intensified. At the heart of this struggle was a battle for identity, who we were as a community and what we valued most. The stakes were high, and the emotions ran deep. The initial excitement surrounding our summit began to fade as the reality of opposition set in. The community meeting had drawn a diverse crowd, but it also illuminated the fissures within our town. While many were inspired by the vision of a sanctuary, others felt threatened. The local economy relied heavily on logging, tourism, and development, and any hint of restriction was met with fierce resistance. Tom, the local businessman who spearheaded the opposition, was particularly vocal. "It's about finding common ground." Their words struck a chord within me. I realized that our approach had been too focused on the sanctuary, without adequately addressing the economic concerns of the community. We needed to shift our narrative to emphasize collaboration rather than confrontation. With renewed purpose, we organized a series of community forums aimed at fostering dialogue. Our goal was to create a space where both sides could express their concerns and hopes. At the first forum, I felt a mix of apprehension and determination. Some expressed their support, while others vehemently opposed our efforts. I could sense the growing divide, a chasm that seemed insurmountable. As a ranger, I had always prided myself on my ability to connect with people, but now I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. As the conflict escalated, I found myself grappling with my own doubts. I had always believed in the importance of conservation and protecting the environment, but was I truly considering the needs of the community? I began to question whether I was doing enough to bridge the gap between the two sides. One evening, I decided to meet with Sarah and Mark to discuss our next steps. We convened in the ranger station, the atmosphere heavy with tension. "We need to listen," Sarah said, her voice filled with determination. "If we're going to move forward, we can't ignore their fears. We have to show them that conservation can benefit everyone." Mark nodded in agreement. "We need to develop a plan that includes sustainable practices, something that allows for responsible logging while protecting the forest. It's about finding common ground." Their words struck a chord within me. I realized that our approach had been too focused on the sanctuary, without adequately addressing the economic concerns of the community. We needed to shift our narrative to emphasize collaboration rather than confrontation. With renewed purpose, we organized a series of community forums aimed at fostering dialogue. Our goal was to create a space where both sides could express their concerns and hopes. At the first forum, I felt a mix of apprehension and determination. The room was filled with familiar faces, some eager to engage, others visibly tense. Tom was there, and I could see the skepticism etched on his face. I took a deep breath and opened the floor for discussion. "We're here to listen," I said, trying to convey sincerity. "We want to understand your concerns and work together towards solutions that benefit both the community and the forest." The first few comments were critical, highlighting the fear of job loss and economic decline. "You talk about preservation, but what about our families?" One man shouted. "What about the future of our children?" As the discussion unfolded, I felt the tension in the room begin to shift. People started sharing their personal stories, how their families had relied on the land for generations, how they felt a connection to the forest, but also a fear of losing their livelihood. I listened intently, absorbing their concerns and validating their emotions. Gradually, I noticed a change. Some community members began to express their desire for sustainable solutions. "Maybe there's a way to do both," a woman suggested. "We could create ecotourism opportunities that benefit everyone." Her comment sparked a constructive dialogue. We began to explore ideas for responsible logging practices that could coexist with conservation efforts. I sensed a glimmer of hope as people started to envision a future where the forest could thrive alongside their businesses. Despite these positive developments, the divide within the community remained palpable. Tom and his supporters were not easily swayed. They continued to rally against our initiative, organizing their own meetings and spreading misinformation about our intentions. "They just want to take our land," Tom proclaimed at one gathering, igniting a fervor among his followers. I felt frustrated and disheartened by their tactics. It became clear that fear was a powerful motivator, and Tom was adept at exploiting it. I knew I needed to counter this narrative with transparency and honesty. As I continued to engage with the community, I began to share the stories of the spirits, the guardian figures of the forest who had guided my journey. The room fell silent, and for a moment, I could see the wheels turning in people's minds. I continued, "Let's work together to create a plan that honors both the forest and the livelihoods of our families. We can find a way to ensure our children inherit a healthy, thriving environment." This appeal seemed to resonate. One by one, community members began to voice their support for collaboration. "You think you can come in here and dictate how we live? This isn't just about trees. It's about our survival." The room erupted into chaos, voices clashing as supporters and opponents shouted over one another. I felt my pulse quicken, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I knew I had to speak up, not just for our initiative, but for the community as a whole. "Tom, I understand your fears," I said, my voice steady but firm. "But this isn't about dictating how you live. It's about finding a way to coexist. We all care deeply about this land, whether you see it as a resource or a sanctuary. We share that connection." The room fell silent, and for a moment, I could see the wheels turning in people's minds. I continued, "Let's work together to create a plan that honors both the forest and the livelihoods of our families. We can find a way to ensure our children inherit a healthy, thriving environment." This appeal seemed to resonate. One by one, community members began to voice their support for collaboration. "You think you can come in here and dictate how we live? This isn't just about trees. It's about our survival." The room erupted into chaos, voices clashing as supporters and opponents shouted over one another. I felt my pulse quicken, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. The spirits of the forest were with us, guiding our conversations and reminding us of the importance of unity. Through this journey, I learned that conflict can be a catalyst for growth. It forced us to confront our fears, listen to one another, and ultimately find common ground. The Smoky Mountains stood as a testament to the resilience of both nature and community, and I was determined to honor that legacy as we moved forward together. As I reflect on my journey as a forest ranger in Smoky Mountain National Park, I realize that the main narrative of conflict and conservation is intertwined with numerous subplots and complexities that shape not just the forest, but the community around it. Each character I encountered brought their own stories, fears, and hopes, creating a rich tapestry of relationships that deepened the overall experience. There was Mark, my fellow ranger, who had dedicated his life to the land. His pragmatic approach often clashed with the more emotional perspectives of others, particularly Sarah, the spirited new ranger. She believed passionately in the spiritual connection to the forest, often speaking of the stories passed down through generations. Their debates were not just about methods of conservation. They reflected a deeper philosophical divide. How do we engage with nature? Is it a resource to be managed or a sacred entity to be revered? Their discussions often left me pondering my own beliefs, pushing me to reconcile the rational with the spiritual. Then there was Margaret, the elderly woman whose family had lived in the area for generations. She became a vital ally in our efforts, sharing stories of her ancestors' deep respect for the land. Margaret's tales were more than just history. They were lifelines connecting us to the past. When she spoke of the spirits that inhabited the forest, I could see the flicker of understanding in the eyes of those who had previously been skeptical. Her presence reminded us all that the fight for the forest was not just for trees and animals, but for the very identity of our community. However, the complexities grew with the emergence of Tom, the local businessman. He represented not only the voice of the opposition, but also a deeper fear that resonated within the community. Tom's livelihood depended on logging, and he was not alone in feeling threatened by our initiative. His fiery speeches stirred up emotions and fostered resentment, creating an atmosphere of distrust. At times, I found myself grappling with a profound sense of empathy for him. I understood his fear of losing everything he had worked for, yet I also knew that change was necessary. This tension was palpable, and it underscored the delicate balance we had to maintain in our discussions. As the conflict escalated, I began to see how personal stories intertwined with broader issues. A single mother named Emma shared her struggles, torn between her desire to protect the land and her need to provide for her children. She worked in a local logging company, and the thought of losing her job terrified her. Her vulnerability resonated with many, illuminating the stakes involved. It became clear that our initiative had to consider not just the forest, but the lives intertwined with it. Throughout this process, I also encountered younger generations eager for change. High school students organized a rally, advocating for eco-friendly practices and sustainability. Their passion was infectious, and it reminded me of the hope that lay ahead. However, I also saw the divide in their perspectives. Some students were aligned with Tom, fearful of what they perceived as radical changes. This generational clash added another layer of complexity to the conflict, highlighting the differing values at play. As we worked to develop a framework for our initiative, I felt the weight of these intertwined narratives. Each meeting became a microcosm of the broader struggle, with voices clashing and converging, hopes rising and fears bubbling to the surface. I often found myself in the role of mediator, navigating the emotions and concerns of each group. I had to balance the urgency of conservation with the realities of people's lives, and it wasn't easy. Then there were the spirits themselves, lingering in the background of our discussions. They became symbols of our struggle, representing the voices of those who had come before us. During one particularly intense meeting, I shared my experiences in the stone circle, recounting the messages I had received from Alawan, the guardian spirit of the forest. Her story resonated with many, bridging the gap between those who were skeptical and those who believed. But with every step forward came setbacks. Misinformation spread like wildfire, fueled by fear. Tom's camp began to circulate rumors that we intended to ban all logging and tourism, painting us as extremists. The narrative shifted, and I found myself fighting not just for conservation, but for our very credibility. It was exhausting and disheartening, yet I knew that transparency and honesty were our best weapons. As the community forums continued, I witnessed small moments of understanding. A logger named Jake, who had initially opposed our initiative, shared his own family history with the forest. He spoke of his grandfather's stories, tales of respecting the land and the spirits that dwelled within it. His vulnerability opened a door for others, allowing them to express their fears and hopes. It was a reminder that our battle was not just against logging or development, but a fight for the very soul of our community. Through all these complexities, I learned the importance of empathy. Each character in this unfolding drama had their own motivations, fears, and aspirations. As I navigated the intricate web of relationships, I realized that our success would depend on our ability to listen and understand one another. The journey was far from linear. It was filled with twists and turns, moments of triumph followed by setbacks. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was beauty in the connections we forged. As I stood in the heart of the Smokies, surrounded by towering trees and the whispers of the spirits, I knew that our fight was about more than just preserving nature. It was about creating a future where every voice mattered, and where the land itself became a bridge that united us all. The turning point in our journey toward establishing a sanctuary in SMOKY Mountain National Park came unexpectedly during a particularly tense town hall meeting. The atmosphere in the room was charged, a palpable mix of anxiety and defiance. Community members filled the seats, their faces a tapestry of hope and fear, anticipation and skepticism. I had prepared for a heated debate, but what unfolded that night would change everything. Tom, the local businessman who had become the face of the opposition, stood at the front, his voice booming as he recounted the dire consequences of our initiative. I've seen the forest change, and I've seen our community struggle. But we must remember that the land is a part of us. It's our history, our identity. Margaret's words resonated deeply. She spoke of the stories her ancestors had passed down, tales of respecting the forest and its spirits. We stand at a crossroads, she continued. We can either fight against each other or come together to find a way to honor both our livelihoods and the land that sustains us. We had worked tirelessly to build a vision that included everyone, yet here we were, facing a wall of resistance. As the evening progressed, I listened to the stories pouring out from the audience. People spoke passionately about their families, their traditions, and their fears for the future. Each narrative was laced with emotion, illustrating the complex relationship they had with the land. A single mother named Emma stood up, her voice shaking as she described her struggle to make ends meet while working in a local logging company. I want to protect this place, but I also need to feed my kids, she said, tears welling in her eyes. Her vulnerability struck a chord with many, and I could feel the air shift. This was not just a debate about conservation. It was a debate about survival. I realized that our initiative had to address these human concerns if we were to move forward. Then, as the discussion grew increasingly heated, an unexpected voice broke through the chaos. Margaret, the elderly woman who had become an ally in our efforts, stood up slowly. Her presence commanded attention, and a hush fell over the room. I've lived here my whole life, she began, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. I've seen the forest change, and I've seen our community struggle. But we must remember that the land is a part of us. It's our history, our identity. Margaret's words resonated deeply. She spoke of the stories her ancestors had passed down, tales of respecting the forest and its spirits. "We stand at a crossroads," she continued. "We can either fight against each other or come together to find a way to honor both our livelihoods and the land that sustains us." In that moment, I sensed a shift. Margaret's plea for unity echoed in the hearts of those present. Slowly, hands began to rise in support of her message. "We need to listen to each other," someone called out. "We can't ignore the history of this place." As the discussion continued, I felt a newfound energy in the room. People began to share their ideas for sustainable practices, exploring ways to balance conservation with economic needs. It was as if a dam had burst, allowing voices that had previously been silenced by fear to emerge. The dialogue shifted from confrontation to collaboration. That night, I realized that the turning point was not just about the sanctuary. It was about healing the rift within our community. We needed to create a framework that allowed for responsible logging, ecotourism, and educational initiatives that celebrated both the forest and its people. I knew that this would require compromise, but the willingness to engage in dialogue filled me with hope. In the days that followed, we worked tirelessly to develop a new proposal, one that integrated the voices of those who had felt marginalized. We organized workshops, inviting community members to share their ideas and concerns. Each meeting became an opportunity to forge connections, to build bridges between those who had previously been on opposing sides. One afternoon, at a workshop held in the community center, I was struck by the diversity of ideas. Local loggers shared their knowledge of sustainable forestry practices, while young activists proposed ecotourism initiatives that could bring in revenue without harming the land. I've seen the forest change, and I've seen our community struggle. But we must remember that the land is a part of us. It's our history, our identity. Margaret's words resonated deeply. She spoke of the stories her ancestors had passed down, tales of respecting the forest and its spirits. "We stand at a crossroads," she continued. "We can either fight against each other or come together to find a way to honor both our livelihoods and the land that sustains us." This approach would open doors for local businesses and provide jobs while ensuring the forest's health. But as we prepared to present our new plan to the town, I felt a familiar wave of anxiety wash over me. Would this new approach be enough to quell the opposition? Would Tom and his supporters see the value in collaboration? When the day of the presentation arrived, the atmosphere in the town hall was charged with anticipation. This journey had transformed us all, reminding us that even in the face of conflict, there is always the potential for connection and growth. In the aftermath of our pivotal town hall meeting, where the community began to unite around a shared vision for the Smoky Mountains Sanctuary, the consequences were both immediate and profound. As we prepared to implement our revised proposal, the atmosphere shifted dramatically, revealing the complexities of community dynamics and the emotional undercurrents that accompanied our newfound direction. The first consequence was a palpable sense of hope that permeated the community. His words resonated with the audience, reminding us all of the deep-rooted fears that still needed addressing. As these discussions unfolded, I felt a growing responsibility to ensure that all voices were heard. It became clear that our path forward would require more than just a revised proposal. It would necessitate ongoing dialogue and education. We organized additional meetings, inviting experts in sustainable forestry and ecotourism to speak. The initial skepticism lingered, but as people began to share their thoughts, I felt a palpable shift. One by one, community members expressed their support for the new proposal. Tom, surprisingly, stood up to speak. "I still have my doubts," he said, his voice steady. "But if we can work together to ensure our family's futures, I'm willing to consider this." His admission was a turning point in itself. The room erupted in applause, and I felt a surge of hope. It was clear that we were no longer fighting against each other. We were working toward a common goal. As the meeting concluded, I looked around at the faces filled with determination and optimism. The turning point had not just been about the sanctuary. It had been about healing, understanding, and forging a new path forward. The Smoky Mountains were not just a backdrop to our struggles. They had become a symbol of our resilience and unity. In the days that followed, we continued to refine our proposal, building on the momentum created during that pivotal meeting. The community came together in ways I had never imagined, united by a shared vision of a sustainable future. This journey had transformed us all, reminding us that even in the face of conflict, there is always the potential for connection and growth. In the aftermath of our pivotal town hall meeting, where the community began to unite around a shared vision for the Smoky Mountains Sanctuary, the consequences were both immediate and profound. As we prepared to implement our revised proposal, the atmosphere shifted dramatically, revealing the complexities of community dynamics and the emotional undercurrents that accompanied our newfound direction. The first consequence was a palpable sense of hope that permeated the community. The previously contentious atmosphere began to soften as people engaged in discussions about sustainable practices and ecotourism. Local businesses, once wary of our initiative, started reaching out to explore how they could be involved. The prospect of eco-friendly tours and educational programs ignited a sense of possibility. This collective enthusiasm was infectious, bringing together families and individuals who previously felt isolated in their fears. However, not everyone welcomed the change. Tom and his core supporters remained skeptical, still reeling from the fear of economic instability. Although he had expressed a willingness to consider collaboration, his hesitation lingered. In the weeks following the meeting, I noticed a subtle but persistent resistance from his camp. They continued to voice concerns about the potential impacts of ecotourism on their livelihoods, fearing that it would not bring in the necessary revenue to sustain their families. This tension culminated in a series of heated encounters. At one community workshop, a logger named Jake, who had initially been supportive, voiced his frustrations. "We've been working these woods for generations," he said passionately. "We can't just flip a switch and expect everything to change overnight. What about our jobs? What about our way of life?" His words resonated with the audience, reminding us all of the deep-rooted fears that still needed addressing. As these discussions unfolded, I felt a growing responsibility to ensure that all voices were heard. It became clear that our path forward would require more than just a revised proposal. It would necessitate ongoing dialogue and education. We organized additional meetings, inviting experts in sustainable forestry and ecotourism to speak. We wanted to illustrate that these practices could coexist with traditional livelihoods, providing a viable pathway for the community. Despite our best efforts, tensions flared again at another meeting when Tom stood up to challenge our approach. "You think you can just sell this idea of ecotourism and everything will be fine," he scoffed. "But the reality is, people will come and go, and we'll be left with nothing." His voice was filled with frustration, echoing the fears of many who felt they were being overlooked. In response, I emphasized our commitment to ensuring that local families would benefit from these initiatives. "This is not about replacing your jobs. It's about creating new opportunities," I explained. "We want to work with you to develop sustainable practices that honor the land and support your families." As I spoke, I could sense a flicker of hope among some attendees, but Tom's words lingered, casting a shadow over our progress. It was evident that we needed to find a way to bridge the gap between the vision of conservation and the realities of economic survival. This challenge led to an unexpected alliance. Emma, the single mother who had shared her struggles at the previous meeting, stepped forward. "I understand your fears, Tom," she said, her voice steady. "But But I also believe that we have to think about our children's future. If we don't take care of this land, what will be left for them? Her heartfelt plea resonated with many in the room. Reminding us all of the stakes involved, Emma's courage sparked a shift in the conversation. People began to share their own stories, weaving together a narrative of resilience and hope. As we explored solutions, I saw a gradual transformation in the room's energy. Attendees started brainstorming ideas, discussing how they could incorporate sustainable practices into their existing work. The dialogue shifted from defensiveness to collaboration, igniting a sense of collective ownership over our future. In the weeks that followed, we launched pilot programs that combined logging with conservation efforts. Local loggers collaborated with environmental experts to develop sustainable practices, ensuring that logging would not compromise the health of the forest. This initiative allowed families to maintain their livelihoods while promoting responsible stewardship of the land. As the pilot programs gained traction, we also organized community cleanup events and educational workshops, emphasizing the importance of preserving the natural beauty of the Smokies. These initiatives fostered a sense of pride and connection among participants, reinforcing the idea that we were all in this together. However, not everything was smooth sailing. The divide within the community remained, with Tom and his supporters continuing to voice their concerns. Their skepticism lingered, casting a shadow over our successes. Despite the progress we made, I often found myself reflecting on how fragile our unity truly was. One day, as I walked through the forest, I encountered an unexpected visitor, Alawan, the spirit of the forest. I had come to recognize these moments as profound reminders of the interconnectedness of our struggles. "You are being tested," she whispered, her voice resonating in the rustling leaves. "True unity requires patience and understanding. You must continue to listen and honor every voice, even those that challenge you." I could see the internal struggle within him, a mix of fear and a desire to protect what he held dear. Slowly, he started to participate, sharing his thoughts and concerns. One evening, during a particularly emotional session, Tom spoke candidly about his fears for the future. "I'm scared," he admitted, his vulnerability surprising everyone. "I've worked hard my entire life, and now it feels like everything is changing. What if we lose everything?" His admission broke down barriers. I could see the internal struggle within him, a mix of fear and a desire to protect what he held dear. Slowly, he started to participate, sharing his thoughts and concerns. One evening, during a particularly emotional session, Tom spoke candidly about his fears for the future. "I'm scared," he admitted, his vulnerability surprising everyone. "I've worked hard my entire life, and now it feels like everything is changing. What if we lose everything?" His admission broke down barriers. Community members rallied around him, sharing their own fears and hopes. It became a moment of catharsis, a shared acknowledgement of the uncertainties we all faced. I watched as the room transformed, a collective understanding emerging from the ashes of conflict. The consequences of our efforts were beginning to materialize in ways I had never anticipated. He took the time to explain to younger loggers the importance of preserving certain trees to maintain biodiversity. "This way, we're not just taking, we're giving back," he said, his enthusiasm infectious. This moment of realization was profound. It symbolized a shift from viewing the forest purely as a resource to appreciating it as a vital ecosystem. The ecotourism initiatives also started to flourish. Local businesses began to adapt, offering guided nature walks, educational workshops, and overnight camping experiences. The journey had been fraught with challenges, but it had also revealed the depths of our connections. Each voice mattered. Each story contributed to the tapestry of our shared experience. The consequences of our actions rippled through the community, reminding us all that we were not just stewards of the land, but custodians of each other's hopes and dreams. The Smokies were alive with the spirit of collaboration, and I knew that together we could navigate the complexities of our journey, honoring both the forest and the families who called it home. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but I was filled with hope, knowing that we could face it together. As the months passed in Smoky Mountain National Park, the struggle for unity and sustainability transformed not just the land, but the very fabric of our community. The challenges we faced had become opportunities for growth, pushing us to confront our fears and redefine our relationships with one another and the environment. The turning point we experienced during that pivotal town hall meeting laid the groundwork for deeper connections. It wasn't just about establishing a sanctuary. It was about healing the rifts that had long divided us. We began to see each other not as opponents, but as allies in a shared mission, united by our love for the forest and our desire to secure a future for generations to come. One of the most significant changes came from within myself. Initially, I had approached my role as a ranger with a focus on preservation, often viewing opposition as a challenge to overcome. However, as I engaged more deeply with the community, I realized that true conservation required empathy and understanding. I learned to appreciate the stories behind each voice, recognizing that everyone carried their own fears and hopes. This shift in perspective enabled me to navigate conflicts with a sense of compassion, rather than defensiveness. Over time, Tom, once the embodiment of resistance, began to transform. His initial skepticism had been rooted in fear, and as he participated in our listening sessions, I witnessed a gradual change. He started to engage in discussions about responsible logging practices, sharing insights from his years of experience. "We can't ignore the land," he said during one meeting, his voice steady. "But we also can't ignore the people who depend on it." This acknowledgement marked a significant turning point, illustrating how dialogue could foster understanding. The community's collective growth became evident during our pilot programs. We launched a sustainable logging initiative where local loggers worked alongside environmental experts. This collaboration not only upheld economic viability, but also educated participants about the importance of forest health. The first day of implementation was a mix of excitement and apprehension. Many loggers, including Jake, were unsure of how these new practices would unfold. As we began the work, I watched with pride as Jake led a team demonstrating selective logging techniques. He took the time to explain to younger loggers the importance of preserving certain trees to maintain biodiversity. "This way, we're not just taking, we're giving back," he said, his enthusiasm infectious. This moment of realization was profound. It symbolized a shift from viewing the forest purely as a resource to appreciating it as a vital ecosystem. The ecotourism initiatives also started to flourish. Local businesses began to adapt, offering guided nature walks, educational workshops, and overnight camping experiences. Families who had once been skeptical about our efforts now found themselves involved, excited to share the beauty of the Smokies with visitors. Emma, who had initially expressed her fears about losing her job, became a key figure in promoting these programs. Her journey mirrored that of the community. She evolved from a place of fear to one of empowerment. However, the path to overcoming our challenges was not without setbacks. There were moments of doubt and frustration, particularly when external pressures mounted. Some members of the community still clung to the old ways, resisting the changes we were trying to implement. During one community meeting, a group of loggers expressed their concerns that ecotourism would diminish their livelihoods. "What if tourists don't come? What if this is all for nothing?" One man voiced, echoing a sentiment that resonated with many. In those moments, I felt the weight of responsibility. It was crucial to remind everyone of the progress we had made together. I shared stories of families who had benefited from ecotourism revenue, illustrating how these initiatives could coexist with logging. I emphasized that our work was about creating a sustainable future, one where the forest and community could thrive together. Gradually, the tide began to turn. We organized events that showcased the benefits of our initiatives, inviting community members to participate in guided tours and workshops. The enthusiasm was palpable as families explored the forest, learning about its ecosystems and the importance of preservation. The more people engaged, the more they began to see the connection between their livelihoods and the health of the land. As we built momentum, I noticed a profound shift in community identity. People started to refer to themselves not just as loggers or business owners, but as stewards of the Smokies. This collective identity fostered a sense of pride and responsibility, reinforcing the idea that we were all in this together. The spirit of collaboration became a driving force, enhancing our resilience in the face of challenges. One particularly memorable event was our first annual Smoky Mountain Festival, a celebration of the community's commitment to sustainability. We invited local artisans, musicians, and food vendors to showcase their talents, creating a vibrant atmosphere filled with laughter and camaraderie. The festival not only celebrated our progress, but also served as a platform for education. Workshops on sustainable practices attracted families eager to learn how to protect the environment. During the festival, I found myself reflecting on how far we had come. I watched as children explored the forest, their laughter echoing through the trees. They were learning not just about nature's beauty, but also about the importance of preserving it. I saw families connecting in ways I had never witnessed before, sharing stories and forging friendships that transcended previous divisions. As the festival came to a close, I stood on a makeshift stage, addressing the crowd. Today, we celebrate not just the Smoky Mountains, but each other. I began, my heart swelling with pride. We've proven that by coming together, we can overcome our fears and build a brighter future for our community and the land we love. The applause that erupted felt like a collective acknowledgement of our journey, a journey marked by growth, resilience, and unity. In that moment, I realized that overcoming our challenges had not only transformed the land, but had also transformed us as individuals and as a community. In the months that followed, the bonds we forged continued to strengthen. We established a community advisory board comprising individuals from all walks of life, ensuring that every voice remained heard as we moved forward. The trust we built became a foundation for future initiatives, enabling us to tackle new challenges with confidence. Looking back, I understood that the journey was not merely about conservation or economic sustainability. It was about creating a legacy of resilience and connection. We had evolved from a community divided by fear into a united force, committed to nurturing both the forest and each other. The Smoky Mountains stood as a testament to our growth, a living reminder of the power of collaboration and the enduring spirit of a community willing to embrace change. As I walked through the forest, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons learned along the way. Each step was a reminder of the journey we had undertaken, the challenges we had faced, and the growth we had achieved. The forest whispered its approval, and I knew that together, we had not only overcome obstacles, but had also discovered the true meaning of stewardship, caring for the land and each other in equal measure. As the seasons changed in Smoky Mountain National Park, the air buzzed with anticipation. Our community was on the brink of a critical moment, a culmination of months of hard work, discussions, and the forging of new relationships. We had transformed from a group fractured by fear and opposition into a collective driven by a shared vision of sustainability and stewardship. Yet, as we approached the climax of our journey, the stakes felt higher than ever. The upcoming community vote on our sanctuary proposal loomed large. This vote wasn't just a formality. It represented the culmination of our efforts to unite the community around a sustainable future. I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. The outcome would determine not only the fate of the sanctuary, but also the future of our relationships. Would we solidify the bonds we had developed, or would old fears resurface, tearing us apart once more? In the weeks leading up to the vote, I organized a series of community forums designed to address lingering concerns and reinforce our collective vision. Each gathering became a space for open dialogue, where people could voice their opinions, ask questions, and share their hopes for the future. I was determined to create an atmosphere of trust and transparency, knowing that this was essential for fostering a sense of ownership among community members. At one particularly impactful forum, we invited local experts to speak about the benefits of sustainable practices. They shared success stories from other communities that had embraced ecotourism and responsible logging. Hearing firsthand accounts of environmental and economic revitalization sparked enthusiasm among attendees. I watched as doubts began to dissolve into excitement, and conversations shifted from fear of change to eagerness for new possibilities. However, not all discussions were positive. Tom, still a prominent voice of dissent, often challenged our progress. "You're painting a rosy picture, but what happens if this doesn't work? What if we lose everything?" His words hung heavy in the air, echoing the fears that still lingered in the hearts of many. I understood his concerns. He represented a faction of the community that felt threatened by change. During these encounters, I realized the importance of addressing fears directly. In one meeting, I invited Tom to share his vision for the future. "What do you want to see happen?" I asked, hoping to foster a constructive dialogue. To my surprise, he outlined a plan that emphasized the need for economic stability alongside environmental protection. This moment was pivotal. It underscored that beneath our differences lay common ground. As the vote drew closer, we ramped up our outreach efforts. Emma took the lead in mobilizing support, organizing door-to-door campaigns to engage those who had been hesitant to participate. Her passion was contagious, and she inspired many to join the cause. "This is about our children's future," she would say, her voice filled with conviction. "We have to ensure they inherit a healthy, thriving environment." With Emma's leadership, we also launched a social media campaign to reach younger generations. We created videos showcasing the beauty of the Smokies, testimonials from community members, and explanations of our initiatives. The response was overwhelming. People began sharing our posts, igniting conversations about conservation and community. I watched as the energy around our proposal grew, transforming from a battle for survival into a celebration of possibility. Yet, amid the excitement, I felt a sense of unease. The closer we got to the vote, the more I understood the fragility of our progress. Old divisions could resurface at any moment, threatening to unravel the unity we had worked so hard to achieve. I knew that the day of the vote would be a test not only of our proposal, but also of our relationships. To prepare for this moment, I sought guidance from Margaret, whose wisdom had been an anchor throughout our journey. We met in the woods, surrounded by the towering trees that had witnessed our struggles and triumphs. "What if we fail?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if everything we've worked for falls apart?" Margaret smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. "Every journey has its challenges, dear," she replied. "But remember, it's not just about the outcome. It's about the connections you've forged along the way. Even if the vote doesn't go as you hope, you've already created a foundation for change." Her words resonated deeply. I realized that our journey was more than just securing a sanctuary. It was about building a community that could weather adversity together. This perspective shifted my focus from the outcome to the relationships we had nurtured. Regardless of the vote's result, we had already made significant strides toward a shared future. As the day of the vote approached, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. We organized a final community gathering, inviting everyone to come together in a show of solidarity. The energy in the room was electric, filled with a sense of purpose and determination. We shared stories of hope, reaffirming our commitment to the land and each other. During this gathering, I encouraged open dialogue, reminding everyone that regardless of the outcome, our relationships would remain intact. "This is about more than just a vote," I said, looking around at the familiar faces. "It's about our shared journey and the promise we've made to one another and to the Smokies." As the night wore on, I felt a sense of camaraderie enveloping the room. People laughed, shared food, and reflected on the progress we had made. It was a reminder that we were more than just individuals with differing opinions. We were a community bound together by a common love for the land and a desire to protect it. With the vote now just days away, I knew we had prepared as best as we could. The groundwork had been laid, and the community was mobilized. The grassroots efforts had fostered a sense of ownership, and the voices of those who had once felt marginalized were now integral to the discussion. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a mixture of hope and anxiety. The culmination of our efforts was at hand, and I could only trust that the bonds we had forged would carry us through whatever challenges lay ahead. In the heart of the Smokies, surrounded by the sounds of nature, I closed my eyes, envisioning a future where our community thrived in harmony with the land. The next day would be a defining moment, not just for the sanctuary but for all of us. It was a testament to the power of resilience, unity, and the unwavering spirit of those who called this place home. Whatever the outcome, I knew that we had already begun to write a new chapter in the story of the Smokies, a story filled with hope, growth, and the promise of a brighter future. The day of the vote in Smoky Mountain National Park dawned with an electric sense of anticipation. As I stepped outside, the crisp morning air felt charged with possibility. The community had rallied together like never before, but I could still sense an undercurrent of anxiety. This was at the moment that would define our future and determine the fate of our sanctuary proposal. As I made my way to the community center, I reflected on the journey we had undertaken. From heated arguments and misunderstandings to moments of connection and collaboration, each step had brought us closer to this pivotal day. The friendships we had forged and the stories we had shared had transformed the landscape of our community. But the question remained, would that transformation hold up under the weight of a vote? When I arrived, I was greeted by a bustling crowd. People were mingling, exchanging nervous glances, and discussing the proposal. Banners hung from the walls, emblazoned with slogans like "Protect Our Home" and "Together for the Smokies." The atmosphere was a mix of excitement and tension, and I felt my heart race as I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the importance of this moment. As the hour approached for the vote, I noticed Tom standing at the back of the room, his expression serious. He had been a vocal opponent throughout this journey, and I wondered what he was feeling as we neared this critical juncture. Would he be able to see the potential for collaboration, or would fear reignite his resistance? Once everyone was seated, I stood before the crowd, feeling the weight of their expectations. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "Today is not just about a vote. It's about our commitment to the Smokies and to each other. We've worked hard to build a future that honors both our community and the land we cherish." I shared stories from our journey, how we had transformed fear into hope, how families had come together to envision a sustainable future. As I spoke, I saw nods of agreement and expressions of support. The collective energy in the room began to shift, filling me with optimism. Then it was time for the vote. We distributed ballots, and the room fell into a hushed anticipation. Each person filled out their ballot, the weight of their decision heavy in the air. I could see the tension etched on faces, some hopeful, others apprehensive. As the last ballot was cast, I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. The counting began, and we all gathered around, watching as the votes were tallied. Each number announced felt like a heartbeat, echoing in the silence. 20, 30, 40. The numbers climbed, and I could feel the collective breath of the room held tight in anticipation. Then came the moment when the tally reached a critical point. 80, 85, 90. I felt a surge of hope, but my heart raced as I realized we were nearing the halfway mark. Tom's supporters were still a formidable presence, and I remembered the weight of his words throughout this journey. Finally, the counting concluded, and the room fell silent. The results would determine our fate. The community leader standing at the podium cleared their throat. "The results of the vote are in," they announced, their voice steady, but filled with a sense of gravity. Guided nature walks, educational programs, and community events brought people together, weaving a rich tapestry of experiences that celebrated our shared love for the land. Schools organized field trips, instilling a sense of stewardship in the younger generation and ensuring that the values we had embraced would be passed down. Yet, the most profound change was the shift in our community's identity. I felt a pang of empathy for him. I understood the fear that had driven him to oppose our efforts, and I knew this moment was difficult for him. As the crowd gathered around me, celebrating our victory, I decided to approach Tom. I walked over, my heart racing. "Tom," I said gently, "I know this is hard, but I believe we can work together to make this a success for everyone." He looked at me, his expression softening slightly. "I just don't want to lose what we've built," he replied, vulnerability creeping into his voice. "I've worked my whole life in these woods. I understand," I said. "But think of the possibilities." The journey from division to unity was not merely about establishing a sanctuary. It was about forging connections, understanding fears, and embracing a shared vision for the future. The vote that had once felt like a daunting challenge had become a powerful catalyst for change, bringing us together as stewards of both the land and each other. In the months that followed the successful vote, we rolled up our sleeves and got to work. "Let's meet and discuss how we can make this work," I urged. "Your experience is invaluable. We need your voice in this." He took a deep breath, and I saw a flicker of determination in his eyes. "All right," he finally said. "Let's see what we can do together." As we shook hands, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. This was a turning point, not just for the sanctuary, but for our community as a whole. We had the opportunity to transform our victory into a collaborative effort that would honor all voices. As the celebrations continued, I looked around at the faces of friends, family, and neighbors, people who had come together to fight for a common cause. In that moment, I realized that our journey was far from over. The vote had been a significant milestone, but the real work was just beginning. We would need to navigate the complexities of implementing our vision, building partnerships, and ensuring that every voice was included. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the day's events. The victory felt monumental, yet I understood the challenges ahead. The sanctuary would require ongoing commitment, and the relationships we had built would need nurturing. But I was filled with hope. Together, we had proven that transformation was possible, that even deep-seated fears could be overcome through understanding and collaboration. The Smokies stood tall outside my window, a reminder of the journey we had undertaken and the promise of what lay ahead. The sanctuary became a reality, and we implemented sustainable practices that honored the forest while respecting the livelihoods of local families. Each logging operation was carefully planned, ensuring that we preserved the biodiversity of the area while providing economic opportunities. Workshops and training sessions engaged loggers and community members, fostering a culture of sustainability that would benefit generations to come. The ecotourism initiatives flourished, with local businesses thriving off the influx of visitors eager to experience the beauty of the Smokies. The journey from division to unity was not merely about establishing a sanctuary. It was about forging connections, understanding fears, and embracing a shared vision for the future. The vote that had once felt like a daunting challenge had become a powerful catalyst for change, bringing us together as stewards of both the land and each other. In the months that followed the successful vote, we rolled up our sleeves and got to work. The sanctuary became a reality, and we implemented sustainable practices that honored the forest while respecting the livelihoods of local families. Each logging operation was carefully planned, ensuring that we preserved the biodiversity of the area while providing economic opportunities. Workshops and training sessions engaged loggers and community members, fostering a culture of sustainability that would benefit generations to come. The ecotourism initiatives flourished, with local businesses thriving off the influx of visitors eager to experience the beauty of the Smokies. Guided nature walks, educational programs, and community events brought people together, weaving a rich tapestry of experiences that celebrated our shared love for the land. Schools organized field trips, instilling a sense of stewardship in the younger generation and ensuring that the values we had embraced would be passed down. Yet, the most profound change was the shift in our community's identity. No longer defined by fear and division, we emerged as a collaborative force committed to protecting our environment. We held regular community meetings to discuss ongoing projects, allowing every voice to be heard. Tom, once a fierce opponent, became a respected member of our advisory board, actively contributing to discussions on sustainable practices. The journey had transformed him, just as it had transformed all of us. As I walked through the forest, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons learned along the way. Each tree stood as a testament to our resilience, a reminder that unity could blossom even in the face of adversity. We had not only created a sanctuary for the land, but had also nurtured a sanctuary for our community, a place where every individual felt valued and connected. In the end, the Smoky Mountains became not just a backdrop for our lives, but a symbol of hope, collaboration, and the power of collective action. The challenges we faced had taught us that true conservation is rooted in relationships, and that by coming together, we could forge a sustainable future for ourselves and the generations that would follow. Years later, the Smoky Mountains Sanctuary flourished, becoming a beacon of sustainable living and community collaboration. The bonds forged during that pivotal time continued to strengthen, with new generations actively participating in conservation efforts. Local children, inspired by their parents' commitment, engaged in educational programs, learning the importance of protecting their environment. The community thrived as ecotourism brought new opportunities, and the forest remained a vibrant ecosystem, nurtured by those who understood its value. Our journey had not just changed the land, it had transformed us into a united force for good, committed to preserving the Smokies for future generations. Join us in protecting our natural heritage and fostering sustainable practices in your community. Each tree stood as a testament to our resilience, a reminder that unity could blossom even in the face of adversity. We had not only created a sanctuary for the land, but had also nurtured a sanctuary for our community, a place where every individual felt valued and connected. In the end, the Smoky Mountains became not just a backdrop for our lives, but a symbol of hope, collaboration, and the power of collective action.